Is this thing on? Yes. All right, I'm Sam Glassenberg from Level X, and now we get to talk about video games. So more specifically, what I want to talk about today is video game design methodologies and video game technology. One example is shown here. This is an example from a video game. We're going to talk about what makes it unique, and then we're going to talk about some of the efforts that we have underway to unleash some of this technology in medicine. So video game technology leverages some of the most complex software, some of the most intelligent analytic systems, some of the most advanced user experiences ever created. It's this beautiful blend of engineering, of art, of user experience, and most importantly, psychology that has been optimized and tested on many hours per week over 1 billion users across the world. Technologies and methodologies that have really been forged in this fiercely competitive market. And video game technology, by definition, is fast-moving, right? In many ways, it's sort of the opposite of healthcare. It's this $100 billion a year business where half of those revenues come from devices that didn't exist 2 years ago and platforms that didn't exist 5 years ago. So the targets are constantly moving and competition is really fierce. And so we have this entire industry that's forced to stay up to speed on the state of the art. And so the way the video games industry does this is when you run a video game on any device, right, it is going to push the device to its limits. It's going to use every technical resource, bandwidth, memory, processing power. Let's say you build some online payment platform, right? Video games, if you plug a video game into it, it is going to use an order of magnitude, right, more transactions than a generic application. This is just the way video games work. If you want to look at things like security, every online game that I have ever launched has been attacked by hackers, right? And that goes for every video game, but not non-gaming applications. So games will also make every device you ever buy obsolete the minute you buy it, which is sort of a good thing, right? It's this industry that knows how to drive demand for better and faster. And it's this demand that motivates the chip designers at Intel, at AMD, at NVIDIA to keep pushing that Moore's Law curve forward, right? To keep doubling chip performance every 18 months because there's going to be some huge market of gamers that's ready to consume that. And so I've spent my career basically riding this curve. Even when I was a master's student here at Stanford 15 years ago, I was spending most of my time here figuring out ways to run better physics simulations on rapidly advancing gaming hardware. But when I actually got into the industry, I began my career at Lucasfilm. My job was flying Star Wars spaceships and video games for a living. And then I spent 6 years at Microsoft, much of which was running a game platform team. And my mission was to try to find ways to exploit Moore's Law, right? This rapid evolution of compute power to make video games look better. To basically take these improvements in semiconductor physics and turn it into deeply immersive experiences. Basically, my job was to build the Matrix, if you've seen the movie Matrix. And so the systems that we would design, the features we would standardize, would show up first in your PC or your Xbox, but 5 to 10 years later, it would make its way into the chip on your iPad or on your Android phone. And so, that smooth user experience that you love on your iPhone, much of that is thanks to technology that was innovation, hardware innovation that was driven by games. So with video games, it's really easy to see how we've been able to exploit this increase in compute power to create more realistic characters, right? This is the most compelling video game character you could achieve in 1989. And by exploiting this constant doubling of computer chip performance every 18 months, we're able to achieve pretty drastic improvements in a matter of a few short years. To the extent that, by the turn of the millennium, we started creating video game characters. That looked kind of human. They were still very computer generated. You can see some very big triangles, but we're getting there. And less than a decade after that, right, we have these film quality visuals, fully interactive at 60 frames per second. And nowadays, we've really crossed what's called the uncanny valley, right, into this place where we have characters with fully expressive emotions, realistic eyes, hair, skin, that really blur the lines of reality. And so I think it's an interesting thought exercise, right? After you've seen what's happened over the last 25 years, right, just project that same growth over the next 25 years and think about where we're going to be. But actually, it's been other trends in things like connectivity and mobility that have really had the greatest impact on gaming over the last decade. So if you look at things like gaming on Facebook, on smartphones, basically what this has done has opened up the gaming market to 1 billion or more people, right, who were never playing video games before, right? So this breaks down all the barriers. You no longer need to spend $500 on a game console. The game just runs on the device you already have in your pocket, right? So now is really the time to get over any of those 80s stereotypes that you have about gamers. Because if you think about all the boys under the age of 18 that are playing video games, twice as many women over the age of 18 are playing video games. So nowadays, video games are totally pervasive. Every demographic is playing across every country in the world and every age group, which includes doctors. And studies have actually shown that video game usage improves, like at Beth Israel, a number of prestigious institutions. Video games, they improve surgical performance amongst practicing surgeons, but more importantly, I think, is that video games present paradigms that both doctors and patients are familiar with. And what came as a surprise to me was how potent these paradigms could be. So while I've been working in the video game industry for 15 years, my hobby has been building medical simulators. Because I am the great disappointment of my family. I'm the black sheep that did not go to medical school. My parents are both doctors, my wife is a doctor, my uncles are doctors, my kids will probably be doctors. And so but I was in the video game business, so every few years somebody would come and ask me to build them a simulator to train their residents to do something. So what I would do is I would, they want to do fiber optic laryngoscopy, epidural placement, something obscure. It was a fun excuse for me to grab whatever game technology we were using at work, spend a few weekends, throw something together, and hand off a simulator to my father, right, to go train his residents. And what was a little bit disturbing was simulators that I would throw together with obsolete game technology in 2002 would go on to win like prestigious medical education awards in 2007, which wasn't to say these simulators were any good because they were all crap, but it just goes to show there's this huge gap between the state of the art in medical training and the entertainment industry. And so so really the thing that brought it all together was in 2012, my father asked me to build him a simulator for fiber optic laryngoscopy and intubation that he could run on his residents' iPads, so we could train him on their iPads. So same thing, 3 weekends, video game engine, put it together, threw it into the App Store so we could put it on their iPads and not bother me about it, and I didn't think about it again. I didn't do any marketing, nothing, and ended up rallying an audience of 100,000 users, which was kind of ridiculous. I think it at one point was the most used surgical simulator in the world. Efficacy studies that were done on this thing showed that it actually improved trainee performance over not using the simulator. Medical schools in California and China were reporting that they were pre-installing it on all the iPads they gave to their medical students. Like what all this made me realize was that it's not just the simulation technology that's totally outdated, it's actually the business and the distribution model. So we know that medical simulation saves lives. If your doctor is going to be performing a surgery on you, you want to make sure that you don't want the first time they perform that procedure to be on a live human being, right? We want surgical simulation. But the way surgical simulation today occurs in sim centers, right? So these cost tens of millions of dollars to build, millions of dollars to maintain. In Chicago, for example, if my father, who's an anesthesiologist, wants to do a day of simulation training, he has to drive. The best simulation center we have in Chicago is 2 hours away. So you drive 2 hours, you spend a day without seeing any patients, you spend lots of money, and then you drive back, right? And we're familiar with this model because this is the model we used to have in the video games industry, right? 30 years ago, if you wanted to play video games, you hop on your bike, you drive across town with your roll of quarters, and you play at the arcade, right? But we don't do this anymore. Nobody plays video games at the arcade anymore. Everybody plays on the device in your pocket, right? But for some reason, surgical simulation is still stuck on the Pac-Man distribution and business model. So really the time has come to close that gap, and that's what we're doing. So we've rallied some of the games industry's really top talent, top designers, developers, and artists in this top secret location in Chicago, and they're closing the gap, right? We've been joined by some seasoned veterans from health tech companies, and we've been working really closely with expert surgeons around the country and specialists in all at a variety of different institutions. And here's some imagery that I think will bring it home. So this is an example of a real, an image from endoscopic airway exploration. This is a human airway through an endoscope. This is what you might find in a simulation center on a simulator costing tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this is what we've been doing with video game technology. This is what we've been doing at Level X. This will run on your last generation iPhone, not iPhone 7 or even iPhone 6. It'll run on a 5S. And so this is what we're doing with video game technology. We're building and we're deploying medical content the same way you would in a video game. And this isn't video. There we go. And this isn't just about making training more fun and realistic. It's about accelerating the dissemination of new approaches. So here you can see we're simulating actually running on a low-end disposable endoscope. You can see the optics are actually really ugly. The lens is all warped. But it actually takes effort for us to try to simulate the lower-end devices as well as it does to simulate the higher-end devices. And if you think about it, the majority of surgeons practice the procedures that they learned in their residency, right? You slice a patient open, you fix it with your bare hands, and then you sew them up again, right? And they've done this thousands of times, and they're extremely good at it. But now there's this new class of minimally invasive procedures and devices that are being developed, right? They're being perfected by pioneering surgeons and device companies. These procedures involve, using existing holes or maybe cutting small new ones and inserting some laparoscopic equipment or an endoscope and performing the procedure over a wire, right? You're basically doing it through a camera on a screen. And the result of these procedures is you've got shorter recovery times, fewer complications, better outcomes. But they require a new set of skills and lots of practice to become as good as you are at the minimally invasive procedure as you are at the invasive one. And the challenge is not just disseminating the new approaches, but also really making the doctor comfortable, right? So they're dealing not just with the 99% case that you would see routinely every day, but that 1% case you might see once a year or once in your career, right? This provides us with an opportunity to really be able to explore 10 careers worth of scary, difficult, conference-worthy cases just, on the device in your pocket. And so, next slide. There we go. So our vision is really to have this sort of year-round medical conference taking place in your pocket, right? If you encounter a rare case in the operating room, what you do today is, you submit it as an abstract to the conference, and at the end of the year, you present it to your colleagues, and you explain your approach, and they argue about, what they think you should have done better. And so you can still do that, but you can also send us the photos, the videos, and the scans, and 3 weeks later, your case can be published and sent out as a virtual surgery scenario to tens of thousands of colleagues worldwide who can argue about the right approach, and they can also compete against each other, right, to get the best score on a virtual patient because, doctors aren't competitive at all. And everyone doing all this gets to earn continuing medical education credit, just like you would for attending a medical conference. And having the conversation there. So our technology doesn't just recreate the visuals, but also the physical response of the tissue, right? Does it bleed? Does it swell? How squishy is it? All of this, thanks to technology, was developed for games. And using things like virtual task trainers, we can actually use game design techniques to train very specific skills and very specific capabilities, right? Trying to get the doctor into flow. So we can train their brains to instinctually know the configuration and the positioning of an endoscope, right, that maybe has taken many twists and turns to get where it is in the body, to the extent that you can't even see where it is, right? And we can really train surgeons how to do specific maneuvers, specific techniques to take this endoscope and make it an extension of themselves, right? This is what the power of game design. And so I think what's more interesting than the physics and the graphics is applying the business models, the psychology, and the sort of science and art of video game design to make experiences that are more engaging and training, right? So, we can imagine as an example this, trying to recreate the thrill of you're being called emergently into the ER because the resident has failed 3 times to intubate the patient, right? You've got to run in, secure the airway, your adrenaline starts to rush, you can hear the pitch on the pulse ox machine start to drop as the patient's oxygen saturation starts to fall, right? And you dive in with your endoscope. And who knows, right, what kind of rare and unforeseen complication or tumor or abnormality you may find in there, right? And this is the kind of thrill, this is the kind of experience that we can create, not just using the graphics and the physics, but using the right game design techniques to achieve the right balance between success and failure, between challenge and frustration, and also give you and sort of to unlock new content just at the right rhythm and to create challenges that can be collaborative, which is something we've really developed a lot in the video game industry, as well as challenges that are competitive, which is something that drives a lot of activity and engagement in games. So this gap that we've been talking about between entertainment and surgical training. Anything else? All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.